Kieran, I went and looked. I typed finances into my YouTube channel. March 2019 was the first time you came on the channel. And the reason I asked, because I think we've both moved house. I've become a father.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
What, boy or girl?
A girl, little Enid, is now 10 months old. So look at the bags under my eyes. Look at there was no grey in my beard in 2019. But it feels like, Kieran, when we were chatting then, that you and I were in the minority. So not that we're smarter than anybody else, but to be actually talking about the things we were talking about in terms of the championship. And fast forward the 3 years, and now everyone talks to me about parachute payments every day. 4 teams have had points deduction, pandemic, big picture, Super League. Do you think the general fan is now more tuned into this conversation about, you've always called it the clown car of the championship, since this past 3 years has gone by?
I think they have. Fans love their clubs. They also hate their rivals. And what we now have is increased data aware out there, which allows people to formulate and reinforce their opinions with regards to clubs. I mean, I certainly from my own position, I did, and I keep a spreadsheet on everything. I did over 600 interviews last year, and I'm a teacher. Yeah, but I've already done over 400 this year, and we're in June. So the level of interest in clubs, because I think people are aware that historically, we love our football clubs, and we like to see them as not being businesses, but deep down we know that they are also businesses, and having an awareness of the business side of the way that the club operates, issues in respect of governance and where governance has failed clubs, is something that fans are aware of. Sometimes they find out, for the wrong reasons. So, if we look at where we are today, we've had a recent, re-establishment of ownership at Huddersfield. We've got the ongoing issues at Derby County. Birmingham, God only help us if something happens there, if somebody arrives. And as you rightly said, points deductions are becoming too frequent, and that's not why. That's certainly not why we fall in love with the game. I'm looking forward to the day where my phone goes silent, that we have to shut down the podcast, and I have to start looking for a job. As opposed to what I'm doing at present, which is teaching a subject which some people will of course remind me is not a proper subject, and also that teaching is not a proper job.
Well, if a lot of people care about it, then it's very, very much a proper subject. Just to piggyback off that, how would you compare in terms of Premier League and Championship, in terms of craziness? Because often, Kieran, the arguments I hear back in defence of how the Championship is funded, they're almost exclusively made by people who support teams who are in the haves columns rather than the haves not, let's just say. And they're normally based around the fact that something is bad elsewhere, so it's okay for it to be bad here. How would you actually compare the kind of climate and the cliff edges, say in the Premier League, where you've got Champions League teams who would be the equivalent of parachute teams in the Championship? Then you've got the middle rung. Then you've got Fulham in the Premier League next year will be the equivalent of Rotherham in the Championship, won't they? How do you sort of compare the two?
I think you're absolutely right, Ben, that there are genuine parallels between the two divisions. That there is more of an established elite in the Premier League, because the nature of if you are the elite in the Championship, you automatically go up to the Premier League, and there isn't that vehicle. But I think you're right in terms of Champions League places. We've seen, once in the course of the last decade, one of the non-Big Six clubs qualify for the Champions League.
Right?
And that was Leicester in 2016.
40 places. Wow.
And Arsenal, the big four is sort of becoming a big five, because Arsenal haven't now qualified for 5 or 6 years. So it does get a little bit repetitious, and I'm not sure that that's good for the long-term benefit of the game. There is a middle tier of what we might refer to as hardy perennials. The likes of probably of Leicester and West Ham.
And Kieran,
Everton.
sorry to interrupt. That's where the big difference would surely be. Where if you're in the middle tier in the Premier League, you're one of the, you tell me, 30th richest clubs in the history of football. If you're in the middle tier of the Championship, you're 2 years from going out of business, right? Yeah,
you're losing 400 grand a week. I mean, that though 400 grand a week is the average losses in the Championship. But I think there is. I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding about the wealth of the Premier League. As loath as I am to say anything positive about Alan Sugar, because he is a bit of a pain at times.
Sir Alan to you.
Sir Alan to anybody. Sir Alan to anybody. Yeah.
Lord.
Yes. His prune juice comment that any additional revenues that are generated by the Premier League instantly go through in the form of wages and agents' fees is actually a very valid one, because being a dweeb, I've got every single set of accounts of every club in the history of the Premier League, so I can work out that since the start of the Premier League, income's gone up by 2,800% and wages have gone up by 3,200. So he's absolutely
I can process that one.
Yes. Yeah, it comes in and it goes straight out again. So clubs are still losing money. I support Brighton. We've been in the Premier League for 5 seasons and we've lost money in 4 of them. Crystal Palace, my least favourite football team, they're losing £1 million a week, and they are an established Premier League club. And I actually think, as much as I hate to say it, I think they're quite a well-run club as well. So if you get promoted, it's a myth that you will become financially successful. You might be able to make money if you sell the club to somebody else. I'm not denying that. The players have the opportunity to increase their wealth, and that's the same for any of us. If you're asked to join the Foo Fighters, you're going to have more money than you're getting at present, I would imagine. I don't know how much you charge, but if I get a phone call from Saudi Arabian University to go and teach football finance there as part of their Project 2030, I would be expecting considerably more money than I get from being a teacher where I am at present. And I have no objection to footballers earning more money if they deliver, if they provide enjoyment for people, then fine. But nobody forces clubs to lose money, by the way, because nobody forces owners to agree to the contracts. When I last checked.
So the key thing in all there is the only guarantee is that your income goes up, and the expenditure is certainly coming with it. Really, the kind of, this is quite depressing for you, Kieran. The key people in your world are owners, aren't they? Really, when you think about it, they're the ones that are pulling all the levers that power your spreadsheets essentially. So let's talk about owners, because despite the fact that there is complete chaos in the Championship, there are some good ones, and I'd love a top 3 maybe, but if I scan down the list in the Championship, look, Norwich fans are a bit suspicious, Watford fans are very suspicious, and Burnley fans are very suspicious, but maybe we'll talk about Burnley in a little bit. But then when you go down, Huddersfield have corrected course well, Sheffield United fans are suspicious, Luton would possibly be a very big thumbs up.
Luton are great, yeah. I know Gary. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Middlesbrough have been a thumbs up, but maybe in the past couple of years that's changed outside of Middlesbrough. Let's just say Blackburn have been a huge thumbs down, but now probably a thumbs in the middle. Look, let me just quickly mention Rotherham as well, and Millwall, who are probably who's up there, Kieran. I've kind of gone with Luton, Rotherham, and Millwall, but what's a good owner, and who are the best owners in the Championship?
Well, I think we've got to look at it on two bases, Ben. There's a quantitative perspective, i.e., is the owner a fair? Is the owner prepared to put money into the club and effectively say goodbye to it?
Yeah, so like Preston or Middlesbrough, yeah,
and Forest and Bristol City. That their owners have put in ridiculous amounts of money. And also, and this isn't one of the good owners. Yeah, Mel Morris did put a lot of money into Derby. He didn't put it in necessarily particularly transparently, but he was a financial backer of the club. So I think we can look at things on a quantitative basis, and I'd include the Venky's at Blackburn there. And then you've got to look at things on a qualitative basis, which is effectively saying, does the club have a strategy? Does the club have a philosophy? Does the club have a plan? Now, a plan should last longer than the next transfer window. But in the eyes of some owners, and also I think it's got to be said, in the eyes of some fans, it is only the next transfer window that is their focus. And if you take such an approach, I think you'll end up getting your fingers burned, and that's what we're seeing at many clubs. But I agree with you. I think Millwall, John Beresco, he's still. So
I'll get comments on that.
Yeah. Sorry, I've not got names in front of me. I think Millwall are well run. Rotherham, I would agree with you. Luton. I think the owners at Bristol City, Forest, Steve Gibson at Borough. If you talk to Borough fans, they've got a very positive perception of him. I know that's possibly not reflected the same at Derby.
Yeah, do you think, just quickly, because Gibson in the Premier League era was always the guy, based on your benevolence rating, that was, he's a great owner. Do you think in the way he, rightly or wrongly, quite aggressively went after Darby, do you think that's changed the perception amongst the general masses?
I can't speak on behalf of fans of other clubs, but I don't necessarily think so, because I would imagine, and I'd also imagine if the situation had been reversed, would Mel Morris have gone after Gibson? Potentially, yes. And I think that's what I've seen in respect of most fans. They would take the view, rightly or wrongly, that their opportunity to promotion has been hampered due to the financial machinations of another club, and therefore they want some form of redress. And we've seen that at Wycombe as well. We might be seeing that in respect of Burnley in terms of what's happened to Everton. So I think it's a sad thing for football that we are increasingly using litigation or the threats of litigation to settle issues. I don't want to sound too Corinthian and put a curled wax moustache on. I think it should all take place on the pitch, which I can understand people say, well, that's hypocritical because I'll be out of a job if it was just taking place on the pitch. But I think with the increasing use of charges, tribunals, legal claims, disputes that is arriving in football is not why we fall in love with the game.
No, it's murky, isn't it? Obviously, where the next question's going, because it's kind of like the wacky races when you actually say all of these names in a row. But we've got Delia and the Potsos, the Americans at Burnley coming back, Prince Abdullah, Bet365, Dai Young, Trillion Trophy, Asia, potentially Mr. Bassini returning, who you mentioned, although I can't actually see that getting ratified. But who scares you in terms of Championship owners?
If Lawrence Bassini got hold of Birmingham City, I would genuinely be very concerned about the club. For anybody that has not read it, I would thoroughly recommend the Charlton dossier for a lengthy character assassination of Mr. Bassini. Now, everybody's entitled to a second chance in life, and it could be that the first time he was made bankrupt, it was his father's fault and not his. It could be that when he was banned from all football for 3 years, due to a review which said that he practiced secrecy and deception.
I'm laughing at Kieran's sarcastic delivery here, not anything to do with Birmingham, by the way. Carry on, Kieran.
It could, that could be very harsh in terms of his upstanding nature. It could be when he tried to force the club secretary to give him the contents of the club safe and all of the cash therein, that he had a legitimate and thoroughly upstanding reason for the use of that cash very, very quickly. I'm not here to question that. And also that when he left Watford Football Club, there was £1.5 million of money from the sale of Danny Graham, and money from the EFL, which I think unfortunately ended up in his bank account and not that of the club. But anybody can make that mistake, Ben, because I've been to a bank in a rush and paid in. Yeah, remember the days when we used to pay checks in? It can happen to anybody. The fact that the funds weren't received by the club was just one of those things.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on Birmingham, but it looks like a few of the other cast of the wacky races are kind of lining up in a little bit of a better direction. I'm looking at Reading, but let's talk about Burnley, because they've just signed Vincent Kompany yesterday. That's kind of by the by, because I saw you tweeting about this yesterday, and I'm fascinated about this loan, because my understanding, and you'll clearly correct me if I'm wrong, is there's a loan that is triggered if and when Burnley get relegated. Obviously, they've been relegated. They've got the parachute payments, but we saw at Sunderland when Ellis Short just pulled the plug, and at Huddersfield when they had a change of ownership, that if you have the parachute payments and you put them over here and don't use them, you will be in the bottom six in the Championship. But I think the terminology used, and this isn't very legal speak, is a significant proportion. Yes, there's got to be repaid in the first year. I don't know what that means, but presumably with the fact that Tarkowski and me are free contracts and there are clauses on McNeil and Pope, etc., and everyone has to sell when they come down, is there any issue that Burnley could end up, if that loan negates the parachute advantage, in a similar position that Huddersfield and Sunderland were?
Well, if we sort of just a little bit of backstory, in my opinion, and it's just an opinion, Burnley were the best run club from a financial perspective in the Premier League. Even though they've only been in the Premier League, I think, for 8 or 9 seasons, they have made the 4th highest level of profits in the history of the Premier League. So that's indicative of how Burnley were run as a club. The owners, the previous owners, didn't put a penny into the club because they didn't need to. It always ran on an even keel. And that made them an attractive proposition for investors. So along came a company called ALK. And what they did, they said, well, we want to buy Burnley. It's going to cost us 170, 180 million pounds. We don't actually have much cash ourselves. So the way that we're going to pay for the club is, A, we're going to use the club's own cash. We effectively give the club's own cash to the previous owners. And secondly, we're going to take out a loan. I think the loan was 65 million pounds from a specialist lender called MSD Holdings. Now, MSD Holdings focuses on the entertainment and the sports industry. So, it does what it does. And it's lent money to Sunderland, and it's lent money to Darby. Not done particularly well with either of those. It's lent money to Southampton as well. So that's the nature of it. But in order to protect itself, what MSD Holdings said, that Burnley is not a guaranteed place in the Premier League. So if the club is if the club is relegated, then significant amount of money has to be repaid shortly after relegation, and another substantial sum of money has to be paid in the first season following relegation. So Burnley get around about 41, 42 million pounds in parachute payments in 2022-23. How much of that is being used to pay back MSD holdings? We don't know the exact numbers. Now, there was somebody on social media yesterday who said he thinks it's 15 million, and that has potential merit. That could be a valid observation. If that is the case, I would then imagine that another 15 million would be repayable later in the season. And the reason why I say that is that the Premier League hands out the parachute payments in instalments over the course of the season. So they'll have made the first payment just now. So therefore, MSD gets their 15 million pounds of it. There'll be another payment, in 2 or 3 months' time. I think reading between the lines and trying to draw, I think, what would be fair conclusions from the.
That doesn't feel like a significant proportion. In my, that's a quarter, just under a quarter.
Yeah. But if there's another 15 million later in the season, then we're then up to half, and they've repaid 30 million out of the 41 million parachute payments. So where else can they repay that money from? Yes, potentially they're going to. They're going to have realisations from player assets. But as you said, Tarkowski and me, both at end of contract. Other players are at the end of contract. They have some saleable assets. Pope, McNeil. McNeil didn't have the greatest of seasons. They've got Cornet, but he's got an escape clause in his contract. So, and they also took out a payday loan in respect of Chris Wood's sale, because there was another instalment which was due next January, and Burnley have cashed in that cheque. So yeah, but I don't think Burnley have got a lot of wiggle room. What I think they do have is, because so many players are out of contract, they've actually got an opportunity for a reset. And if they recruit well, then there's no reason why they can't do well. If they don't recruit well, then they won't find it easy. And remember, those players, although many of those players, I think, historically have had a history in the Championship, have got out of the habit of Saturday, Tuesday, Tuesday, which is one of the great things about being a supporter of the club in the EFL. Because if Brighton lose, and remember, we went a long period of time. We had three wins in 25 in the Premier League. You've got a long time between matches to feel sorry for yourself. That doesn't tend to be the case in the Championship or League One, League Two.
And I think the thing I'd add, if people feel that we've been a little bit too in one direction there on Burnley, is we heard a lot of chaos talk about Bournemouth, and they kind of just waited for year two. They cleared the decks in year one, and Ake and Ramsdale and Wilson all went, and we heard about all of these back payments that were required on transfers. And then they realised that in the second transfer window, with a year two parachute payment having been quite calm, if you can then blow 7-8 million, well, you know what happened, and they're back in the Premier League. So there is the possible year two if Burnley can be patient with Vincent Kompany and ride out year one. What I was going to ask Kieran is there a likelihood of points deductions this season? Because we heard in the middle of last season about Stoke and Borough and Bristol City, and they all seem to be doing the right thing. When you compare a Darby and a Reading, or maybe even Sheffield Wednesday, and actually talking to the EFL and getting in ahead and saying, look, here's what the balance sheet's going to look like. Can you go easy on us? Do you think we'll get any points deductions this season? Because those were the three clubs that were being mentioned a year or so ago.
Stoke have played their get out of jail free card because they sold the stadium to Bet365.
Yeah.
And
now you can't do that anymore, right?
Yeah. They did that I think they did that either at the end of May or early June 2021, and the rules changed on the 1st of July. So
is there you don't have to answer this, but is there a likelihood they would have known that the rules were going to change?
Yeah. You can read the room.
Okay. Say no more.
and therefore they did the best thing in the interest of the club. No issue with that whatsoever.
No.
Whether the rule should have been there in the first place is a separate issue. In the case of Borough, I think Borough are actually probably okay because they have had a few player sales. I don't think they've got a lot of flexibility. And I think they've got a few players who will be, again, out of contract. So that will help them. Bristol City, I thought it was very interesting. I think it was their chief executive who said, we might have to budget for a points deduction next season, and if so, so be it. Which I thought was fascinating comments. They historically benefited from the sale of Adam Webster, which was which has been within the 3-year window. I think that will be dropping out of the window fairly soon. But I think that he's obviously I've got a vested interest because he's at Brighton. He's in his 3rd season at Brighton, so therefore for 21-22, the sale of Webster, they made a fair amount of profit on that deal. That will have helped them. But they did seem to be resigning themselves to a potential issue. And if it's only a 3 or 4 points deduction, I don't really think it's going to have a negative impact on a side that's going for a playoff place, because it's one match, or it's 1.5 matches.
Interesting. We'll keep an eye on that. So I'm just lamenting the fact that Ipswich sold Adam Webster for 2-3 million quid, and then a year later he was sold for 25 million quid. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Speaking of FFP, I always get asked this, and I don't know the answer. So you're going to smarten me up now. If a team goes over the 39 million limit and gets promoted, so they're out of jurisdiction, they're then in the Premier League, not the EFL, what happens?
Right. There is now a gentleman's agreement between the Premier League and the EFL. Now, I'm hoping that will be maintained, because I think it's fair to say that the relations between the Premier League and the EFL aren't necessarily what they could be, because the EFL keeps saying, just give us 25% of your money and all of football's problems will disappear. And the Premier League's going, I think it's quite as simple as that. So there is. I don't think they're on the best of terms, but I think this will still hold. If a club is promoted and is subsequently found by the EFL to have breached profitability and sustainability rules, what tends to happen is that the charges will be laid, and that there will be a fine on that club. Now, although the Premier League is a separate legal entity to the EFL, the agreement is that the Premier League will collect that fine, or will ensure that fine is paid by the Premier League club. And we've seen that in respect of Bournemouth. We've seen that, in respect of Fulham. We've seen that in respect of Leicester City historically. So that's where we are. The Premier League has said we will not be prepared to impose points deductions, because it will affect the integrity of our competition. You committed your crime in the EFL. By all means, give some money to the EFL as recompense. What you're not going to do is to mess around with our table. If somebody messes up and breaches Premier League profitability and sustainability rules, then we're at liberty to impose fines, points deductions, wage caps, squad limits, and so on. But they are not willing to go further than saying that we will reinforce any financial penalties to clubs which are in breach.
Are you happy with that, Kieran? Because if I drive my car very recklessly through Bedfordshire and I get followed by Bedfordshire police, I endanger lots of Bedfordshire citizens, and then I cross the border into Hertfordshire. Is it right that Bedfordshire police would then go, oh, he's gone now? I still endangered lots of people, didn't I?
You did. The Premier League's concerned about the interests of the Premier League. So, sort of to use your analogy, if you're a wanted felon in France and you flee to the UK, and there's not an agreement between the two parties for the transfer of prisoners, then yes, you are now potentially a loose cannon in the UK, but the UK will say, well, there's no paperwork, there's no agreement. So it all comes down to the relationship between the two entities. My personal view, remember Brighton have been promoted to the Premier League, so if it happened to Bournemouth or Fulham, because Fulham will have lost an absolute fortune in the Championship last season. If Mitrovic is on the $6 million a year that he's rumoured to be receiving,
I'll say no more. I'll speak to you after the people.
Then would it be in Brighton's interests for Fulham to have appointed deduction? Yes, it would. Would I want it? No, I wouldn't. On the pitch, let's settle it there, and let's address off the pitch issues, and that's what financial mismanagement is. Let's address off the pitch issues as much as we can with off the pitch settlements.
100%. I've got 3 more for you, Kieran. A lot of people are going to have Norwich and Watford when they're doing their 1 to 24 as number 1 and 2 in whichever order. I'm sure Watford and Norwich fans won't care which order that would be if they do finish in the top 2. I've posited many times on this channel that the presence of parachute payments coupled with the absence of just chaos, just don't sack your manager, don't sell all your squad, keep it competent, you should be challenging for promotion, shouldn't you? Are we expecting to see our friends wearing yellow back in the Premier League in a year's time?
Well, I think this is a football question rather than a football finance question, and I know nothing about football. But what I would say is, I think there's a greater chance of that being the case in respect of Norwich. I think for their business model, their ability to generate revenues from other sources is greater than that of Watford. Watford, which, again, I saw Brighton play both Norwich and Watford last season. Watford were without doubt the worst side that I've seen in the Premier League for a fair while. They'd given up. And also looking at some of the comments coming out of the dressing room at the end of the season, there was a lack of harmony in the dressing room. So I think Norwich are a well-run club. They've got a large fan base by Championship standards, and
sold 23,000 season tickets, Kieran.
Yeah, and that's impact. And I know as an Ipswich fan, you don't want to hear that. That impacts their ability to go up as well. They will be planning to perhaps let 1 or 2 players go, but I don't think there were that many that were outstanding last season.
Max Aarons would be the one, won't it?
Yeah,
I think they could cash in on Cantwell if someone will pay.
Yeah. So somebody says he looks very like Amanda Staveley. I've never been seen in the same room together.
I don't think he's had any work done, has he? I'm not suggesting for 1 second Amanda Staveley has. I'm just saying Todd Cantwell hasn't, Kieran.
No, okay.
Is that legal proof?
So I think Norwich will be competitive. Remember, we've been through sort of a bit of a Men in Black phase in life, that we spent a year and a half or a year and a quarter in the middle of the biggest crisis in our lifetimes in the form of the pandemic, and that hit football clubs, and it hit football clubs in the Championship worst of all, because clubs in Leagues 1 and 2 got 0 financial support in terms of grants and loans from the Premier League. Now, the Premier League did offer some support to clubs in the Championship in terms of agreeing to pay the interest on loans to allow the Championship clubs to repay outstanding tax liabilities. Although for some reason Derby County decided they didn't want to take out the loan. I have no idea why. No idea. Perhaps Mel Morris has got a sensible answer for that. Those clubs have suffered from a year and a quarter of loss of match day income, and therefore clubs that are in receipt of parachute payments relatively have got an even bigger financial advantage, which I think was a major contributory factor to what we saw during the pandemic in respect of the clubs bouncing back up again. So parachute payments are a very, very clumsy solution to the problem of what happens if you go from generating £100 million of TV money in a year to 7.
Yeah.
And
you'll be pleased to hear I've kind of softened, and I'm far closer to your view on this now than the militant view I had maybe when we first sort of started speaking. And I try and say to people, Kieran, yeah, you can, because you get, oh, scrap them, do this, do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's one thing that's not going to change the 18 things we need to change to swap the Christian Perslow's cliff edges down to a smoother slope, right?
Yeah, I'm with you entirely there. And the much broader issue in terms of distribution it is not being addressed, because why are these clubs being relegated straight away? Yeah, if people are just focusing on them being promoted, but then they're getting relegated in the first season of going up to the Premier League. So therefore, there's something wrong in the Premier League as well with regards to revenue distribution. There's something wrong in the Championship. Yep. And there's also something wrong in League One, because we've got Rotherham, as you said, are the Norwich of, we've got Wigan effectively doing the same as Watford. So why is this happening? Well, it's because the clubs in the Championship, they have bullied the clubs in Leagues 1 and 2 in exactly the same way that the Premier League has bullied the clubs in the Championship. The clubs in the Championship get 80% of the EFL TV deal. The clubs in League 1 only get 12%. The clubs in League 2 get 8%. So I've put together countless spreadsheets with changing the numbers, changing the parameters. And here's the problem, Ben. If you redistribute money, not everybody can have more money.
No.
That's what redistribution means.
Well, and by definition, Kieran, the ones that are making the most are going to get less, yeah. Yeah.
And people say, yes, we want a sustainable game. We want a more competitive game. We like the idea of competitive balance. And it's also the same, is that if you, I'm not part of political, you say, is there a case for having more money invested in education? Is there a case of having more money invested in the health service? People say, yes, we believe in education. We believe in the health service. But none of it costs us any money.
Taxes.
Yeah. Oh no, we don't want that. No, we want it for free. Yeah, and this is the problem. So I talked. I've got a Manchester United podcast in about 45 minutes, and I'll be talking to them, and this will be saying, but when people talk about redistribution, this is what everybody does. They look to see who's earning more money than them. So Manchester United, they bitch about Chelsea and Manchester City. Liverpool bitch about Manchester United, and they ignore the fact that Liverpool generate 3 times as much money as Leicester or Palace or Brighton. So the inability or the unwillingness of people within the game to take a big step back and then ask themselves this question. Now, I've worked with politicians. I've worked with the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. I think I've been fairly open about that. And I keep asking this question: what is your objective? What do you want to achieve? And nobody has given me an answer, because I can write you a spreadsheet solution. You tell me what your objectives are. I say, oh, we want something to be fairer. Okay, but then you've got to define fair. No, I'm not advocating some form of uber socialist utopia where every club gets the same amount of money. I think those clubs which have been historically successful, which have invested in infrastructure, should reap the rewards of that. But what we have seen is that those clubs have actually used their power. They've used the threat of Super League historically to extract more and more concessions and more money out of the smaller clubs. And now we have this. Well, we know who the top 4 are going to be next season.
And essentially, you're asking people in the most tribal topic in the world to step out and see the big picture in it. Yeah, and that's probably why, actually, Ipswich not being in the Championship and getting relegated, I can kind of look at it a little bit more objectively and hopefully see that for what it is. But anyway, I've banged on about that for many years. Can you talk to me about Nottingham Forest quickly, Kieran? Because Nottingham Forest got promoted with some very, very good loan players. They had Jed Spence in from Middlesbrough, James Garner from Manchester United, Philip Zinkernagel from Watford, Keenan Davis from, oh crikey, Aston Villa, and Max Lowe from Sheffield United. Can you just talk to me about the pros and cons of this system? Because we saw in the 18-19 this great playoff final where whoever lost out of Aston Villa and Derby were going to go south, basically. And Derby had Mount, Tamori and Wilson on loan, and Villa had Abraham, Mings and Tuan Zabi on loan. Obviously, in the short term, it seems very sensible. You can't afford to buy these players, so you borrow them. But it's like the whole renting a house as opposed to buying a house thing. But then once you get promoted, surely all those players' values have increased and the amount you would then have to spend relatively has increased to replace them. So, yes, huge round of applause for Forest and Steve Cooper. But what do you do now? Talk to me about the benefits for and against.
Well, let's take a look at stakeholders. But there's three stakeholders here. There's the club, there's the parent club. They are seeing their player get development in the senior game. So for
Jed Spence, that's Middlesbrough, yeah?
Yeah. And, you think about the likes of Tammy Abraham, who went out on loan on a regular basis to Maury Mount. I'm old enough to remember David Beckham going out on loan to Preston. He made his debut at the Goldstone Ground and so on. So there's that as an issue. There's the acquiring club. They are getting a better class of player at a lower price because you pay a loan fee. You save money. You don't end up spending £8 to £10 million on a turkey. And if the loan player is not very good, I'm mentioning no names, Aaron Connolly, then at least you can return them after 6 months. We've got some players at Brighton that have been are in about to start year 5 of a 5-year contract. We've not seen them for the last 2 seasons.
Matt Clark, yes,
yeah. Well, at least Matt Clark, to be fair to Matt Clark, he's covered his own face because his wages are being paid by the Championship club, and he's been player of the season at Derby, player of the season at West Brom.
Yeah,
good player. Yeah. I just don't think his style of play is necessarily in a line with what Graham Potter's looking for.
No.
So yeah, I think that one would be fine. But from the acquiring club's point of view, it means you've got a short-term financial commitment of 1 year. You're paying a loan. You're paying a loan fee. You don't commit yourself to millions of pounds for a player that might not turn out to be okay. And if he does turn out to be good, you get promoted, and then you get the additional money. And then you've got the player themselves. Well, the players want to play at as high a level as possible. They get a chance to develop. They get the opportunity to train with the first team, and so on. All of those things are positive. So. Huddersfield were promoted in 2017, same year as Brighton. Aaron Moy was superb. They had Casey Palmer. They had Izzy Brown. All of whom had superb seasons. So I think utilisation of the loan market is beneficial for all of the parties involved.
So vaguely,
and once you get up, if you do get promoted, you all of a sudden you've got a big sandpit to play with because you've got £100 million in your bank account.
Indeed. The deal that kind of irked lots of Championship fans was Harry Wilson last season because it was this kind of Championship guaranteed player, and look, we never quite know exactly what these deals. I haven't seen the deal memorandum, put it that way, but the idea was that Fulham weren't actually going to pay anything in the first year, and you'll tell me about amortization and value on balance sheet, etc. But were other Championship fans reasonably wound up by the fact that Fulham had got this really good player that turned out to be the Robin to Mitrovic's Batman without having to pay up front, and now they're promoted?
It was good negotiation.
It was.
And it's the same as spotting a player that everybody else has been looking at, but you've taken a punt on them. My view is fair play to the club. there were 4 or 5 clubs that could have done the same deal, and it just so happened that Fulham were prepared to come up with the readies. I don't have an issue.
Brilliant. But right, beans, I've got you. Last one, Kieran. Beans, I've got you on, and I have a very heavy vested interest in Ipswich, but it's not Championship. I was thinking about Ipswich, and take the comparison to Norwich, and Ipswich had the investment, and you kind of think, why would someone invest in Ipswich and not in Norwich? Norwich are always either in getting 40 million parachutes or 100 million Premier League TV money. And I was kind of thinking about it, with the difference in the rules and the way clubs are sanctioned and the hard figures in the Championship and less so in League One. I think you'll explain better. I think it's relative to turnover, but in terms of owner investment, I don't think there's anything stopping people. Is there almost a sense that you're better off buying Portsmouth or Ipswich in League One than you are buying I don't know, Sheffield United in the Championship? Do you see what I'm saying? That you can build infrastructure, have a run at it. And we've seen these teams that stay in the Championship for ages and slowly, like Ipswich and, maybe Darby over a long time. Obviously, Forest got up. I'm trying to think of another good example, but Bristol City maybe have been in a while, kind of slowly died. Is there almost a better sense of taking a League One team than a Championship team?
Yes, first of all, the buying price is cheaper, so you're saving yourselves money. You're absolutely right that the owner investment, which is referred to as football fortune in the P&S rules for the League One and League Two, allow if you put in an extra £1 million, then that increases the League One club's budget by £1 million, and it can also allow you to shift that dead wood off and out of the club, and effectively clear the deck. So yes, it does buy you time. And also you're resetting when you're not losing £400,000 a week in your operational costs. So there are certainly benefits in taking such an approach. And then it comes down to the fans, because League One's fun.
Bloody hard work, I tell you.
Yeah. It's not a walk in the park, but going to Morecambe, going to Aki, and I'll hold my hand up. We did a live show at Accrington on the price of football a couple of months ago. The new facilities that they've got there are
I've not been since it's been
fantastic.
Built, actually, yeah.
You get to see different parts of the country. You're made to feel welcome. You have a great day out. There's lots of positives, but and the standard of football is decent as well. There is a financial case, provided the fans buy into the project of having such an approach. I mean, if we take a look at what's happening at Plymouth at present. I know the guys at Plymouth a little bit. Got chatting to them, and
so unlucky, Kieran. They got 80 points and didn't finish in the playoffs. That's absurd.
Yeah, but they do have a strategy, and without wanting to sell what they're doing, I think their aim next season with what's known as Project 35. So they're getting rid of Ginsters as the front of shirt sponsor, and instead they've got this thing called Project 35. And the thing is, the first thing you say about, well, what's Project 35, and then you find out that
I buy it late at night from a service station?
Well, unfortunately, no, I hope not, because that's the one thing you won't be able to do, because Project 35 refers to the fact that in parts of Plymouth, 35% of children are in food poverty. And it is highlighting.
Oh, excuse my joke.
No, it's okay. But it's a fantastic project, and it's being funded by Ginsters, who are giving out 100,000 free school meals this year. This is club, community, local companies coming together and saying, we're going to use the football club in a positive way, as opposed to having an unheard of Maltese registered gambling company plastered across the front of our shirts.
Kieran, sorry, 2 questions have just come in my head. Have you got time for 2 more quick ones?
Quick ones, yeah.
Do you think it's about time, speaking of League One, that people forgot about what happened 20 years ago with MK, because every time they get mentioned, it's still, or someone will say something to the effect of, now, I don't like the way they came about, but I respect blah, 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 blah. Is it time that we know what happened 20 years ago? And okay, I do live 20 minutes down the road now, so I've got a little bit of a soft spot for them, but they bring through managers, they bring through players, they run pretty efficiently. Do you think it's time people backed off MK? They can't change 20 years ago now.
I hate Crystal Palace due to what happened in an FA Cup second round, second replay match at Stamford Bridge in 1976. Football is all about irrational hate. I agree with you that I think they are quite a progressive club in terms of what they're trying to achieve on the pitch. But winding up opposition, if you take that out of the game, what's the point? I was beginning to soften my approach, I'll be honest, and then the behaviour of MK Dons towards who did they play towards Wycombe Wanderers in the playoff final? So in the playoff semis final, where they only sold 2,000 tickets. They could have sold, Wycombe asked for 5,000, and then they made the Wycombe fans sit in the upper tier, and they separated them into
I was at
blocks.
The game, Kieran. Yeah, they were either side on the top tier up there.
To stop them from making noise, to stop them from supporting their club. Now, remember, Wycombe fans did not get the opportunity to see their club play in the Championship for the first time ever. They didn't get their chance to see their club get promoted because of the pandemic. They did have an opportunity, if MK Dons had done the decent thing, to see their club in a playoff match, to get to a match at Wembley. And Pete Winkelman should hold his head in shame for the way he behaved in order to get what he considered to be a very small advantage. So my loathing of MK Dons has actually amplified, not because of the historic issues, but if that's the way that he thinks football should be, he's going to get it from me.
That always used to be the Blackburn Rovers trick. You'd be on the back 8 rows of the top. It was that Darwin end up the top there. Just quickly, Kieran, Middlesbrough used the word. I'm not having a pop at Middlesbrough. It was just a fascinating thing. They used the word cheat in their press. Official club stuff used the word cheat. I think I'm right about that. Someone fact check me if I'm not wrong about that. Do you think that clubs and people within the game should use that word when it comes to financial indiscretions?
Well, given that
it's very contentious, isn't it?
Well, we use the word all the time in respect of what happens on the pitch. Players do cheat, so therefore, can that word also be used from a management and governance perspective? If there is evidence to back it up, I would say yes. If there's evidence that a club has been manipulating to give a financial advantage,
willfully in bad faith, basically, and
I can't remember who they might have said it about. I can't remember what they might have said it about. So I'm not forming an opinion as to the accuracy of the statement, but I don't see why it can't be said. I can assure you that I was at a fans meeting at Brighton where the Brighton owner used that word in respect of another club, in respect of off-the-field activities.
Interesting. Okay. That's a good thing about you, Kieran. You always get a straight answer, don't you? Kieran, absolutely brilliant. I know you never even go to sleep and you're working every hour God sends. So thank you for giving us an hour of your time and your pearls of wisdom. Can you give a plug for the book and the podcast? I'm sure people will know already, but we'd love to hear.
Well, if you are at all interested in the world of football finance and you want to delve in deeper, I've written a book called The Price of Football. There are occasional unsigned copies available. Because I've always got a Sharpie with me. And this is really embarrassing because I'm a teacher, actually. That's my proper job. And one of the people I was teaching said, could have come in. It was his dad's birthday. He bought him the book and would I sign it for him? And that was pretty. that was a particular low. But yeah, the ego was up there. And I do a twice weekly podcast with comedian and writer Kevin Day, also called The Price of Football.
And one of those is a mailbag show, so people can ask you questions through that, can't they?
Yep. Although I think we've got 800 unanswered questions. we honestly felt when Kevin and when the producer of the show says we want to go from 1 week to 2, we want to have a reader's questions. We just looked at each other and said, well, who's going to make the effort to write in? But fans do, and I think the breadth of questions for me is fascinating, we seem to be doing okay. I think we're getting around about 200,000 downloads a month now. Brilliant.
It's a great show, and you won't mind me saying you two bust each other's balls a lot, don't you?
Well, he's a Palace fan and I'm a Brighton fan.
Perfect. Kieran, thank you so much.